Something happens to women when they cross 40, but no one really talks about it out loud. It isn't just biology or hormones or time. It's quieter than that. Like the soft click of a door closing behind them while everyone pretends nothing changed. One day she's seen. The next, she's politely invisible. She notices it first in small ways. The waiter's eyes skipping over her, the sense that her stories land softer. The compliments slow. The messages dry up. The mirror becomes an argument she can't win. She looks around and realizes the world has shifted its gaze toward younger faces, fresher bodies, louder stories. And in that silence, a question begins to echo. What now? The calendar says she is in the thick of her life. The culture hints she is past a peak she never agreed to. 40 is supposed to mean freedom, confidence, arrival. She's supposed to have found herself. Yet many women describe it as a strange vanishing. They become the backbone of families, the mentors at work, the reliable ones who hold everything together. But reliability doesn't get applause. It gets taken for granted. So she starts to wonder who she is when no one is watching. The friends who once shared secrets now compare supplements. The men who once chased her now call her strong. The word lands heavy, like a consolation prize. Strength is useful, but it doesn't answer the ache to be witnessed, chosen, desired, not as a duty, but as a person. What happens to women after 40 isn't simply aging. It's a psychological shift that feels like erasure. Society stops reflecting them back, and they're forced to find their reflection within. Some discover new meaning. Some crumble quietly, but nearly all hear the same haunting whisper. Did I already live the best parts of my life, or am I finally about to begin? Sometimes the starting line arrives disguised as an ending. There's a mechanism that clicks into place around 40, a quiet reprogramming of visibility and worth. For years, a woman's sense of self has been shaped by response. Smiles, glances, invitations, the warm hum of attention that says, "You matter here." Then the current thins. The room still holds her, but the gaze moves on. She is present, yet less reflected. This isn't vanity. It's conditioning. From adolescence, culture trains us to equate being seen with being valuable. Compliments become breadcrumbs. They lead you back to yourself. Remove the trail, and you feel lost in familiar rooms. The mirror still works, but the audience is gone, and the silence starts to sound like doubt. Call it identity withdrawal. The external feedback loop collapses, and the mind must build its own scaffolding. It feels like stepping off a moving walkway. For decades, she was carried forward by recognition. Now she has to generate her own momentum. Some sprint toward new mirrors, fitness renaissances, radical haircuts, romantic risk. Some disappear into achievement, stacking credentials like armor. Others slow down and practice a rarer skill, seeing themselves without applause. Underneath is a simple cause and effect. When validation drops, anxiety spikes. When anxiety spikes, impulsive reinventions multiply. Algorithms intensify it. Social feeds flood her with younger templates and older outliers who appear ageless. Against those curated extremes, ordinary midlife looks like failure, even when it's success. The mechanism, then, is a transfer of power. Worth moves from the crowd to the core. It is disorienting precisely because it is honest. She can keep chasing borrowed light, or she can learn to generate her own. Quieter, steadier, less dramatic, more durable. The world may not clap for that, but that's the point. The clapping stops so she can finally hear herself. The change doesn't explode into her life. It leaks in quietly. She notices it at a dinner party when the waiter asks if she and her friends would like separate checks, ladies. His tone warm but faintly paternal. A small reminder that she's no longer seen as part of the same story as the 20-somethings across the room taking selfies with dessert. Later, she opens her phone and scrolls through photos from 5 years ago, not because she misses how she looked, but because she misses how being seen once felt effortless. At the office, a younger colleague interrupts mid-sentence to explain something she's been doing for 15 years. It isn't malice, it's momentum. The world keeps moving, and she feels the drag of invisibility like gravity. Even her husband, kind and loyal, seems to look through her instead of at her. He still loves her, but habit has blurred the edges of awe. Her friends react in different ways. One joins a running club, dyes her hair platinum, and begins collecting compliments like medals. Another starts therapy, unlearning the idea that attention equals affection. A third downloads a dating app just to look, and ends up chasing the echo of validation she swore she didn't need. Then there's the quiet rebellion, a woman who stops apologizing for taking space. She buys art supplies, paints in the kitchen, and rediscovers a voice she thought belonged to her younger self. No filters, no captions, just color. The truth is, midlife doesn't erase desire. It changes the direction of the gaze. The applause used to come from the crowd. Now it has to come from within. Some women chase the missing noise. Others learn to dance in the silence and realize it's not silence at all. It's peace disguised as emptiness. Think of this phase like a tide that changes without a storm. Nothing dramatic breaks. Yet the shoreline is new. The body keeps its steady beat, but the mind begins to ask different questions. What used to feel exciting now feels noisy. What used to feel flattering now feels transactional. Attention once felt like warmth. Now it can feel like fluorescent light. In youth, approval is a shortcut to identity. You try on versions of yourself and borrow reflections from whoever is watching. By 40, the shortcut stops working. The same dose gives less effect. Not because she is less, because the self wants a deeper currency. It wants meaning that does not depend on an audience. Stress and responsibility add layers. She is caring for parents, children, partners, teams. The weight builds quietly, and with it comes a new kind of vigilance. She scans for risk, for safety, for people who drain or restore. Pleasure shifts from the thrill of being chosen to the calm of being understood. This is not losing desire. It is desire growing up. Memory reorganizes too. She sees her story in chapters rather than snapshots. She notices patterns that were invisible before. The choice she made at 20 now explains the feeling she has at 40. Regret is not the villain here. It is information. It points to places that still need care. Call it a second wiring. Less rush, more depth. Less chasing, more selecting. She becomes the curator of her attention. She edits her circle. She prefers one sincere conversation to 10 shallow introductions. She returns to activities that place her in flow. Long walks, painting, reading, building something real with her hands. The biology is simple to her lived experience. The body asks for steadiness, the mind asks for truth. When she honors that, the rest of the story starts to make sense. The shift rarely arrives as one big moment. It seeps in through subtle signals, tiny markers of transformation that, once you learn to spot them, are impossible to unsee. These are the quiet signs that a woman has crossed the invisible border between how she was seen and how she now sees herself. 1. Nostalgia for her former reflection. She looks back on photos not to mourn youth, but to remember what it felt like to be mirrored by the world. The longing isn't for her old body. It's for the recognition that once came with it. 2. Sudden bursts of reinvention. A new haircut, a new wardrobe, a new project that seems random to everyone else. It's not vanity. It's an instinctive attempt to realign identity with visibility. 3. Selective withdrawal. She cancels plans, avoids crowds, and feels strangely detached from group dynamics that once energized her. Silence becomes both a shield and a test. Can she stand being with herself? 4. Heightened sensitivity to comparison. Social media becomes an emotional minefield. Every scroll is a quiet audit of where she stands in the hierarchy of relevance. 5. Recalibration of desire. The thrill of being wanted starts to feel shallow. She begins to crave connection that feels like recognition, not conquest. 6. A pull toward authenticity. She's drawn to books, conversations, and people that tell the truth. Unpolished, unperformed truth. Her tolerance for superficiality evaporates overnight. 7. The emergence of quiet confidence. After the disorientation fades, something steadier begins to form. She stops needing to prove she's still the same. She starts enjoying that she's not. These aren't symptoms of decline, they're signs of evolution. The chaos is only the noise of an old self breaking apart so that something truer can take its place. Not every woman collapses when the noise fades. Some feel the quiet as permission. It is a pause that lets their own voice come through again. When the outer world softens, the inner one grows clearer. The first feeling is relief. The second is fear. The third is curiosity. If I stop performing, who am I now? Counter signals are small but decisive. She starts saying no without a paragraph of reasons. She leaves the chat that drains her. She answers later and with intention. She chooses a walk over a scroll. She buys clothes that fit her life, not her feed. She stops pretending that constant availability is kindness. These tiny choices are a private revolution. Resilience here is composure, not armor. She enters a room and does not shrink or swell. She lets silence sit. She listens for what is true instead of what will win. Attention becomes what it always was, a currency with unstable value. She decides not to peg her worth to a market that never stays still. Daily anchors help. A morning routine that belongs to her. Journaling before the rush starts. Moving her body for function, not approval. One friend who tells the truth and stays for the answer. Work that is chosen, not inherited. Boundaries that feel like clean lines instead of walls. These are not dramatic. They are sustainable. Then something subtle happens. Without chasing reflection, she begins to glow. People notice, but she does not adjust to meet their gaze. The glow is not a performance, it is an outcome. It comes from alignment, from energy not being leaked into constant proving. Resilience after 40 is not clinging to relevance. It is trusting gravity. What is heavy is allowed to fall away. What remains is dense and real. The applause fades so that she can hear tempo again, and once she moves to that beat, she does not go back. Every internal shift has its enemies. For women over 40, the antagonists are rarely people. They're systems. Social media is the loudest one. It runs on youth, novelty, and endless comparison. Every swipe refreshes a hierarchy that says your worth expires if you stop performing. Algorithms don't reward contentment, they reward hunger. So even peace begins to feel like invisibility. The second antagonist is culture itself. Advertising still markets anti-aging as moral victory, not preference. Movies trade mothers for muses. Music celebrates rebellion until the woman grows past the age of being a fantasy. Everywhere she looks, the message repeats, stay relevant or step aside. It's not a conspiracy, it's inertia. A world still calibrated for the gaze of men who never had to age out of desirability. Workplace bias amplifies it further. The same qualities that read as ambition at 30 are labeled difficult at 45. A man with gray hair gains gravitas. A woman gains questions about fit. She's told to mentor the younger generation, but rarely invited to lead it. The language of empowerment becomes a velvet ceiling. And then there's time, the quiet amplifier. Children grow up. Parents decline. The schedule that once defined her vanishes, leaving empty hours that whisper too loudly. That space can feel like freedom or exposure, depending on how prepared she is to meet herself inside it. The antagonists aren't villains in a story. They're mirrors held too close to the surface. They feed on doubt, repetition, and distraction. Awareness is the only solvent. Once she sees how the machinery works, it loses power. The trick isn't to fight the system, it's to step outside of it, into a world measured by depth instead of noise, by growth instead of relevance. When the reflection disappears, it doesn't leave quietly. The consequences ripple through every layer of her life. Some are visible, most are not. The first is disorientation, a low hum of unease that makes even simple things feel slightly off. She finds herself staring at the same screen for hours, scrolling not for information but for proof that she still exists in a world that no longer mirrors her back. Then comes the emotional withdrawal. She stops showing up with the same energy, not out of apathy, but exhaustion. Every conversation feels like a performance she no longer wants to audition for. The mask she wore for 20 years, competent, charming, endlessly adaptable, starts to crack. Beneath it is a face she barely recognizes, and the realization is both terrifying and freeing. Relationships strain under the shift. Partners misread her silence as anger. Friends sense distance and assume betrayal. But she isn't leaving them. She's leaving the version of herself that needed their approval. The paradox is cruel. She grows stronger, but to others it looks like she's fading. The deeper consequence is spiritual. Without external validation, she confronts the raw question of meaning. What makes life feel worthwhile when applause stops? For some, that void turns into anxiety, even depression. For others, it becomes the space where they finally begin to build authenticity. The fallout is never tidy. It's messy, non-linear, full of relapses into old habits. But eventually, a strange calm takes root, the acceptance that life isn't shrinking, it's refining. The woman who once measured her worth by reflection now understands that invisibility is not death. It's transformation. The world didn't stop seeing her. She simply stopped needing to be seen to exist. Agency begins when she stops asking for permission from crowds that never had the authority to define her. Midlife offers a rare exchange: less applause, more authorship. She can keep negotiating with a market that pays in temporary attention, or she can rewrite the economy of her life so the returns compound in meaning, not noise. First, decisions become smaller and truer. She chooses mornings that belong to her, not to the feed. She selects 3 priorities per day instead of drowning in 30. She defines success as alignment between values and behavior, not as the performance of being impressive. When she slips, she corrects quietly. No public penalty box, no dramatic reset, just the next right action. Second, she builds structures that protect energy. Boundaries are no longer slogans. They are calendars, budgets, and bedtimes. She unsubscribes from obligations that exist only to prove she is still cooperative. She invests in skills that compound: persuasion, calm, craft, financial literacy, deep focus. She treats attention like capital and allocates it with intent. Third, she renegotiates relationships. Partnership becomes a collaboration of 2 adults, not a stage where one performs usefulness. Friendship becomes reciprocity, not counseling. With children, she shifts from constant rescue to confident trust. She is present, not performing. She is honest, not harsh. Agency sounds like clarity spoken at room volume. Finally, she chooses a horizon, not a fantasy of being 20 again, and not a resignation to shrinking years, but a concrete, buildable future. A body trained for function. Work that serves a purpose she can state in 1 sentence. Money that buys time, not trophies. A creative practice that refills the soul whether or not anyone sees the result. Agency after 40 is not rebellion. It is stewardship. She becomes the custodian of her time, her attention, and her story. The world may never clap again. It doesn't need to. She is busy living the life the applause was distracting her from. The ending is not a fade-out. It is a reveal that the volume was never the measure of the song. After 40, the story shifts from being seen to being understood. The mirror that once confirmed her worth becomes a window. She looks through it and realizes she has been here the whole time, waiting for permission that no one could grant. She stops chasing echoes and starts building a life that sounds like her. Goals get smaller, but meaning expands. The same mornings that once felt routine now feel earned. She does not need to prove youth or relevance. She needs to practice presence. Each choice is smaller, slower, truer. The world still sells the fantasy of starting over, but she sees the trick. She is not starting again. She is continuing with clarity. The same skin, the same mind, a different contract with time. She no longer bargains with visibility. She invests attention like capital, first in herself, then in anyone who earns it. Peace, once mistaken for boredom, now reads as luxury. Silence, once a threat, becomes texture. The applause stopped, yet the quiet was never empty. It was space. In that space, she hears her life breathing back at her. She learns the difference between loneliness and solitude. One depletes, the other restores. The relationships that remain are made of recognition, not performance. Work becomes craft, not proof. The body is a home, not a billboard. She edits with care, fewer promises, deeper delivery. She keeps what is alive and lets go of what only looked alive. She is not the woman who vanished. She is the one who stayed after everything false fell away. What survives is not smaller, it is concentrated. The world may not notice the change, but she will every morning she wakes without the urge to audition. That is enough.